All right. Hi, everyone. This is Emily, and I'm a digital transformation consultant at Hyperbot Systems. For today's discussion on evolution of the procure to pay process, I'm very glad to have Tony on the call with me. Uh, Anthony is the VP of Finance at Delcath. Anthony, would you mind telling us a little more about yourself before we get started?
Sure. I have over 30 years experience. I started my career in public accounting many years ago. I went into the private sector. I've worked in, small to medium-sized companies. Most of my career in companies that are, probably in the startup phase that needed more experience, taking it to the next level, through going public stages or through an acquisition phase of the company or growth phase of the company. I've had an opportunity to work for a very large organization that got sold for $5 billion as well. So overall understanding of good processes, good business practices in both small, medium-sized companies. The industries have been mostly manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing, and the last 10 or so been in the biopharma space as we're manufacturing both devices and drugs. So I think most of the experience has been at the senior level of finance, both as CFO and VP of finances, and both in public and private companies. So private equity or VC-backed companies. So that's a little high-level background.
Got it. That's amazing, and really glad to have you here on this forum today. So, and along with the many organizations that you've worked in, you have also been associated with all the processes of finance as well. Would you like to share what kind of procure to pay initiatives you've been a part of in the various organizations?
Yeah, I would say when I first started, I think most of the procure-to-pay part of the organizations I've worked at has been really manual. As I mentioned, most of the companies that typically are startups that are looking for the next phase, as a startup organization, your biggest priority is making sure you're paying your vendors and making sure you're paying your employees. But as you grow, you're looking at other facets of growth, and bringing on additional accounts payable folks is probably not the most ideal use of your resources or your cash at that point. So looking at systems and looking at being more efficient processes around the procure-to-pay, which tends to be the biggest area of volume, I would say, in these small organizations as they take it to the next level at first. Making sure we have the better controls in place and better processes in order to support the growth of the business. So looking at all facets of procure-to-pay, from the purchasing side of it, do we have the proper approvals, to the accounts payable side, where are you processing the invoices, are you paying the right vendors, and do you have controls on the payments itself?
Got it. Understood. So, Tony, for the sake of the audience, would you like to break up the overall procure to pay process into sub processes?
Yeah, I would say that there's the front end of the process is primarily the procure process, right? Having the procure process where you may have a requisition process where you may have somebody who's attempting to purchase a service or a product, making sure that that person is authorized and you're getting the best price, right? You're putting a bid out to purchase any products. You're getting the best price. You're working with legitimate vendors, and you have the proper approval to spend that money. So there's a requisition process that typically where an employee would ask the manager to make sure that they're allowed to buy the goods or the service. And then there's a purchasing process, typically where the larger organizations may have a purchasing department where the requisitions would come into this purchasing department, and there they may vet the vendor. They may try to negotiate the best price they can, discounts, long-term agreements, contracts. Mostly that stuff will be handled in the purchasing group. And once the decision is made to purchase the products, they can go out and issue the purchase order and commit the organization into the purchase of those goods and services. The next phase of it is really kind of in the finance realm of the space, I would say. It's making sure that you're receiving the goods or the service. You're now making sure that the pricing that you've committed to in the purchase agreements are all in agreement. The amount of goods that you agreed to purchase has also been received, and you're making sure that you're paying the vendor based on the contractual terms, in the proper timing and in the proper amounts, if it's currencies, or then you handle sales tax, service charges, shipping charges, or whatever other charges you may have. But making sure that it's being processed timely and the vendor is happy that you've made the payment in a timely fashion.
Got it. And how do you exactly see the evolution of these processes over the last decade or so?
Yeah, I would say, there's been a lot of evolution in the space in the last 10 years, I would say. As I said, my career started 30 years ago, and I feel like maybe the first 20 years, a lot of it is very manual in a sense. In that, as I mentioned, most organizations start with very small finance groups, primarily making sure that the vendors get paid. So there's never been a lot of investment in that side of the house. And it's probably the first process that most organizations really build out to make sure that they have the right processes, or legitimate small processes in place to make sure that vendors get paid, as well as employees, I should say. But I don't think when the company grows, I think the investments, the resources get to other areas, primarily sales, marketing, and there's less focus that goes back into the accounts payable to procure-to-pay process, because many feel like it's been working for since we're beginning the company, so why we need to change that area. So I think there's probably a lack of focus in going back and reinvesting money in processes that the company feels may work, or invest in that area at this point. So I think the biggest area, I think, when I come on board is that the companies begin to grow. The accounts payable group is probably beginning to grow, but they also don't want to spend more resources in hiring more people. So it's an opportunity to really look and see what kind of processes what kind of systems or technologies may be available at that point. So I would say in the last 10 years, I would think that the OCR technology has been really helpful in that, where invoices would come in and get scanned, right, and be more electronic, right. I also think, in the past, people would mail invoices, right? There was a lot of paper flowing between organizations, and invoices would get lost in the mail. And I think now with the kind of, maybe prior to COVID, but around the COVID area, I think there was a more concentrated effort to do everything electronically, including sending invoices into customers. And then there's been the adoption of, if the invoices are electronic, how do we get them to scan? How do we store them? I remember organizations that come in and there's file cabinets full of invoices, and you're still writing checks, right? And you're mailing checks to customers, and the checks are attached to the old vendor invoices, and you got receipts attached to these in their invoices. So I think in the last 10 years that's changed. I think receipts are being tracked in systems. I think the purchase orders are now all being sent electronically, as invoices being sent electronically. And I see payments being sent electronically, either through ACHs or wires. So I think the adoption of less paper makes it more efficient, and requires, I think technology companies have kind of expanded that to include some of these newer technologies in order to make the procure-to-pay more efficient, more effective, and with better controls around it, and less risk for errors, lost mail, slower payments. People would say the check's in the mail. Now you can actually send payments electronically. You can prove it within a minute that you sent the payment. So I think any adoption in those areas, which have kind of happened in the last 10 to 15 years, has been really great for small organizations as they grow, and they don't have to grow their finance team to, and they can just do a certain investment in some of the technologies that they may find in the systems.
Got it. So, just out of curiosity, Tony, apart from OCR or digital adoption, really, what other kinds of tools and technologies are used in different aspects of procure-to-pay process?
Yeah, there's probably requisition processes, right? I mean, there's certain definitely technologies that that have been adopted by some of the larger ERP systems, right? I think a lot of the ERP systems now, when they do adopt, I think they're talking organizations into making things a little more easy, electronic, web-based, as people become more global and more remote. I think it makes it much easier to do everything through a system, and I think some of the larger ERP systems have adopted some of those technologies very quickly. I would say some of the mid-size and smaller type ERP systems, I think there's some challenge. They probably don't invest in those areas as much, and I think because their customer base tends to be smaller organizations that may want to invest in people as opposed to technologies and systems. I would say that, and when you start looking at the technologies around some of this, is being able to do requisitions electronically, being able to do the purchase orders electronically, being able to I would say being able to get the best vendor prices, going out to the marketplace and getting the best vendors, all electronically. And so I think it's a less of a manual process and more of a systematic process that has improved the processes, at least around purchasing. Around the accounts payable processes, I think there's been a lot of adoption around payments that the banks have adopted, ACHs, wires, credit cards, to make the payment processing more simplified. And I mentioned, as you mentioned, OCRs, capturing the invoices and scanning the invoices have been a big adoption that probably eliminates a lot of the data entry and manual errors that an accounts payable clerk may have.
Got it. Okay. And after, the adoption of such tools and technologies, are there certain challenges that still exist on the procurement side, after all these years?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenges around the procurement side is me as a someone who wants to buy a product or a service, it's time, right? So I have to get a requisition in. My requisition has to go to my manager. The manager gets an email, but he also gets 1,000 emails. So times he gets that email and approves it. Now I have the approval to get that requisition to the purchasing department. Goes to the purchasing department. Now they're looking for the best price. So that may be another week. And for somebody who's putting the requisition in, I probably want that good a service today or tomorrow, right? As soon as possible to do my job, right? So there's probably lack of timing by the buyers, right, of the goods and services sometimes. So there's still this perception that, having all these, controls and processes in an organization slows down your job from the buyer's perspective. So I think, if you can speed up the process and get the approvals faster from your manager, not through, everyone gets emails, so maybe there's a way to do it through kind of a Teams approach or providing, buyers a little bit more autonomy in the approval matrix in the organizations. So there's things you can do to kind of speed up the process, and even on the purchasing side, right? And again, making sure that we can get the best price quickly and negotiate an agreement with the vendors in a quicker process, that would help too, right? And getting the information in front of them so you can get the best price, um, the best pricing from the vendor is important.
Mhm. Got it. Understood. So, why do you see so many organizations still having significant elements of purchases without a rigorous PO-driven process?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to my original point a minute ago, right? Is it takes such a long time, and if I have to research what I want to buy, and I've already researched and I found the best price on Amazon, why do I have to go through kind of the approval process with my manager and then get to the purchasing department, right, and then buy the product? So, um, so I think some of it is, the hesitation of the non-finance folks of just going out and buying, right? And everybody's used to that in their personal lives, right? They can go online, buy what they want. They feel like they get the best price and have it delivered the next day. And in organizations, that's still a little bit of uh, the mindset is still not there in certain organizations I've worked at. And that, if you're going to buy something, you're not going to get it the next day. There's still a process you need to follow internally, and making sure that you have an agreement. You're not putting the company at risk. You're agreeing to certain terms and conditions that make sense, because it's beyond just going to Amazon and buying a good. It's making sure that the good complies with the standard practices or the standard goods that you're buying from all your other vendors. And there's some regulations, especially in my space, in the biopharma space, and there's probably space in the technology space, that you really can't go out and buy whatever technology you want, because it may not fit into your products, or you may not fit into the inventories that you need to purchase. So there's a little bit of mindset that, again, you're not going to get everything the next day. You're going to have to make sure you plan ahead and follow the kind of the process. And I think the technology can help with the process and making it shorter and quicker, and being able to be approved and get the purchase order to a vendor much quicker, though.
Mhm. So, apart from the timing that we just spoke about, what kind of other challenges have you seen, common in the procurement process in general?
Yeah, and I think the other parts of it becomes really about, one of the big things is in the whole Procure-to-Pay is the three-way match process, right? And that takes a lot of time. Obviously, you have to get the purchase order out. You have to agree on a price. You have to agree on the quantity of goods. Then you have to receive the goods, right? And then receiving the goods, you have to make sure it matches, what you've agreed to purchase, right? And certain vendors may ship more products, less products. What happens if they only ship half of the goods, and you didn't get the whole goods? How do you receive all that? And then sometimes the pricing maybe not be exactly what you agreed to, right? And there's a lot of, I would say, back and forth sometimes with vendors. And did I ordered 10, you only shipped me 7. Where's the other 3? I need the other 3, right? Or, we agreed on a $10 price, and now you're charging me $10.50. What happened, right? So, so I think there's still a little bit of challenges around resolving some of those disputes in a timely fashion, because by the time you're realizing that the price is wrong, it's already got an invoice. Your accounts payable person's already got it. And then making sure that the accounts payable person now has to follow up internally and ask the right questions, make sure that we're not overpaying. So that, that takes time in resolving. And by that time, you've already used the goods most likely. So now, your leverage for negotiation, returning the goods, is probably not there. So again, there's this, it's still a process of receiving goods. It's still a process of making sure it's still, it's what you expected. And then the quality of goods, right? Is it what you expected in the quality? Do you have to return them? And the returning process is probably not as easy. I think there's some challenges around there, right? And then you have to return the goods, make sure you have return authorizations, make sure you're not paying those invoices in the system. So all those things need to make sure that that everything talks to everybody, right? The procurement play is talking to the accounts payable groups, either systematically or through an email to make sure that you're not paying these vendors for things that you didn't want.
Correct. Got it. So, what are the best practices in streamlining the procurement process in order to have, better financial control?
Yeah, I would say the best processes I've seen is where, I would think that there's kind of a requisition process that it goes through, it gets approved, that the manager is looking at his budgets, make sure that those are within their budget for expenditure, making sure that they're buying goods um, that is part of the manufacturing process of you in inventory, and then goes to a purchasing group, and they're vetting that as well, right? So there's a second set of eyes, make sure that the vendor is a vendor that's been approved by the organization to do business with. You're getting the best price, you're getting the best product from those vendors, and then making sure that you're receiving the goods on a timely fashion, and you're checking to make sure that what you expected is what you received. And then on the invoicing side, making sure that once everything's received in the systems, that you're paying the vendor what you've agreed to in the agreement or the purchase order in a timely fashion, right, within the vendor terms.
Tony, what kind of collaboration would you suggest between the finance and procurement teams in order to achieve the company's common business objectives?
Yeah, I would say procurement and finance play a very important role within the organization, and a partnership role. So I would say that the purchasing group needs to understand what is approved from a budget perspective, and making sure that they understand, what limits people have to approve, and making sure that if they feel uncomfortable, they can go to the finance group and make sure that, and ask if these things are within budgets or no, and maybe making sure which accounts they go to as well, right? Make sure it's getting coded to the right places. The other place area is that, there's a good interaction between on the vendors with the vendors as well, making sure that we're paying the right vendors the right amounts. So, typically the purchasing group is negotiating with the vendors, they're setting up new vendors, they can make sure that the vendors are providing the documentation necessary to be set up within the organization, and that then flows over the payable group, making sure that we have the right, bank accounts, the regulatory forms we need from an IRS perspective, making sure that we have the right addresses. So we're paying the right place and the right organization as well. So there's definitely a lot of interaction between the procurement play and the payables group, just in the vendor maintenance side of the house. But they also can play a role in kind of the budgeting and the forecasting side, making sure that when the purchasing group is getting requisitions to buy goods, that it's within the company's budget constraints.
So, Tony, can you share the inefficiencies that still exist in the overall procure-to-pay process despite the best-in-class ERP implementations?
Yeah, I still think there's still quite a few inefficiencies, and I think some of it's just old-fashioned thinking by I don't know, all the finance folks and maybe AP folks that don't want to change. I still see people writing checks. I still see people very manually entering purchase orders. I still feel people are manually entering, AP invoices into systems, and doing it the old-fashioned way. I think some of it is, maybe lack of investment, as I mentioned earlier, that maybe they're not investing in this process, and it works fine very manually. I think some of it is people are scared of some of the newest technologies and very slow to adapt in this area. Obviously, it's probably the biggest area of risk in the sense that most of the, I guess, fraud, I would say, happens in this kind of space. in the accounts payable procurement space. So I think people are very risk averse in adopting newer technologies unless they have a full understanding. And I think some of the newer technologies actually minimizes some of this risk, right? And I think it does away with some of the data inputting, or the data inputting of risk of manual entering invoices, or manual entering amounts, or manual doing checks, right? So I think, getting people more educated around some of these new technologies, understanding how they can minimize some of the risk in those areas, and how it can be better efficient, and understand how they can, from an accounts payable clerk perspective, how the job can be much easier and less manual, I would say. So making sure that people are aware of these things. So, and again, I've seen where organizations are very slow to adapt. They feel that, I've been in an organization where they want to write checks because they feel that they're getting some benefit of it. That the check's in the mail, now you're getting 2 weeks of float because the check's in the mail by the time you get cashed. But it becomes really inefficient because writing a check and the process of writing a check costs you money. It takes a lot more time. A check, you have to pay for a check, you have to mail the check. There's postage fees. There's all kinds of fees. You're susceptible to fraud, that someone may steal the check. You got bank account numbers on the check, as opposed to doing an ACH, where an ACH, you may do it electronically, may be done within 24 hours. And there's a lot more security around payments electronically to the bank, making sure that you have the right vendors and the right bank accounts. So I think as some of it is the changing of just the thought process and understanding what's out there is important to make these inefficiencies go away.
Got it. And apart from the mindset, Tony, what do you think it is that has not happened yet?
Yeah, and I think a little bit of the mindset is that the investment in this area, I think, as I mentioned, most organizations set up an accounts payable group right off the bat, right, in order to pay their vendors right off the bat, right? So, and I think, as the companies grow, they don't tend to go back in time and look at what was happening there, because everyone feels that at that point the accounts payable group is working fine and efficient, and everything they're doing there is good. But I don't think if you continue to do manual processes, the company grows, it becomes a lot more inefficient. You can't close the books faster. You can't. You're adding more risk. Vendors don't get paid on time. You have upset employees. So there's definitely an area where I think people need to invest more time and understand that process, as opposed to just in the beginning when the company started as a startup. So as long as the company is evolving, I think all areas, including accounts payable, needs to evolve to keep up and with the rest of the business.
Got it. Understood. And just one last question, to get the gist of things. What do you think could be done to address these efficiencies in a better way?
Yeah, I think educating some of the accounts payable clerks, maybe getting them to conferences, to seminars, understanding what kind of technologies other people are inheriting. Bringing in people who have experiences in other space in this area. Getting the CFOs and the controllers out there and learning these technologies and how it could help. Talking to other controllers, talking to other CFOs. I think sometimes where CFOs and controllers only think about their business, they only talk about their own business. They don't go outside their own business and talk to other folks who are handling or doing controller work in other organizations, or CFOs in other organizations. I think there's an opportunity to do some networking, understand what they're doing, and adopting some of that. And there's a way to do that through conferences, webinars, networking, understand what the technologies are, and then bring that in-house, and then invest in it, right? And finding the money to invest in these technologies only helps the organization grow, keep up with the growth. At the same time, further educates the account payable clerks and keeps them fresh and happy as well too. So it motivates them. I think it motivates them as well, and that if they're learning these new technologies, they feel that they're learning and contributing to the business, as opposed to just data entry and accounts payable data entry work. So
Got it. All right. Thank you so much, Tony, for being here and, walking us through the entire evolution of the procure-to-pay process. In the next session, maybe we'll talk about the AI helping in the procure-to-pay process, possibly the threats as well as the benefits. But it was really great speaking to you today, and those were some very valuable insights that you shared. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I look forward to our next discussion.